Hi and welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Debbie Lyons here today with Kelly Presnell, Director of PR and Marketing at Hilton Head Hospital. And we're talking today about orthopedic surgery.
Orthopedics, yes. We have really been focusing on orthopedics at our hospital with bringing on a few new orthopedic surgeons to the community. And today we have Dr. Doug Scott. He is an orthopedic surgeon who specializes in shoulders, arms. He did a fellowship specifically in shoulders.
Ooh, that's great.
Yeah, which is shoulder replacements, rotator cuff, frozen shoulder. But he is a general orthopedic as well. So he does a lot of sports as well for the athletes in our community. He is a team, he's a team physician for USCB.
Oh, is he? Good for him.
For the Sand Sharks. So he's been a great addition to our team, young, dynamic.
Ooh, I can't wait to talk to him. We all have shoulder things. Stay with us. We'll talk to Dr. Scott.
No one likes to wait, especially in any ER waiting room. I mean, when I'm sick or my family has a medical issue, I don't feel like waiting around with a lot of other people. Not to mention they're sick too. Honey. And my family does not wait patiently. You can imagine how uncomfortable and how long it can seem. But then I found out it doesn't have to be that way. I can check in online and wait anywhere I want. What's not to love?
It's the smarter way to ER at Hilton Head Hospital.
Pain. It can be different things for different people. A shoulder that takes you out of the game. A knee that stops you in your tracks. Ready to return to a better you? Hilton Head Hospital is here, right in the Low Country, to help heal what hurts. From diagnosis to treatment to full recovery, our fellowship-trained orthopedic specialists are committed to getting you back to your best. Hilton Head Hospital. Extraordinary care right here at home.
We are back here on Healthy Living. As promised, Dr. Douglas Scott is here. We're talking about all kinds of things today, orthopedically related. I really want to talk, and I know this is your specialty, about shoulders.
Absolutely.
First of all, let's talk a little bit about what a shoulder specialist is and does, and what kind of, I mean, you're credentialed for all of that. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So,
you Clemson boy, you.
That's right, and a local person here, so I have to support the local teams. But a shoulder specialist really takes care of all matters with shoulder pain. And the nice thing about doing shoulder surgery and why I was interested in it is it really encompasses a lot of different types of medical issues and orthopedic issues. So for something like a rotator cuff tear, which would be kind of a sports-related injury, to a broken shoulder, which would be some level of trauma, like breaking the top of the humerus. So we take care of that as well. And also taking care of arthritis, so like something where you would do a shoulder replacement. So we really do all those things, and that's what really got me interested in shoulder specifically, because there's a wide breadth of different things to treat for one body part.
Oh, it's pretty interesting. You know,
pretty complicated, so a lot of...
well, at 61, I've never had any, and I work out every day, I've never had any shoulder issues.
That's perfect. That's what we like.
But, but I think as I've gotten older, I'm noticing parts of my shoulder that I didn't know existed.
Right, and that's very common.
Is it really?
Absolutely.
I didn't know there were so many little owies.
There are a lot of little ligaments and tendons, and the anatomy is a little complicated because basically it's the shoulder is a ball and socket, but the socket is actually pretty shallow. So it's not in the hip is also a ball and socket, but the socket part really goes, the bone goes all the way around the hip. But the socket in the shallow is, the socket in the shoulder is very shallow. It's almost like a golf, in our area we kind of call it a golf tee. It's that shallow.
I got it. I hear you.
But the rest of the socket is made up of the rotator cuff and ligaments and tendons and all things and other capsular entities that encapsulate and surround the shoulder. And that's why it's so flexible, because it really has those soft dynamic stabilizers rather than bone around it. So because it's so flexible, that really fortunately or unfortunately exposes it to a number of tendinous problems, a number of wear and tear problems from people that are active.
And you know, it's so funny because I've felt like, oh, I have a rotator cuff tear. I don't know what that means.
Right.
But I mean, you know, you get these neck
little
pain,
tweak.
shoulder pain. Is that pretty typical? We were talking about frozen shoulder.
Yeah, very
And
common.
What is that? What is that? I've
So
never
that's a
heard
good
of it.
question. So frozen shoulder is, we actually don't know exactly what causes, we don't know the exact pathology or the pathophysiology involved with what causes it, but generally it's an insidious onset of pain, meaning that it doesn't really happen for one reason or another. It's just someone has maybe kind of a tweak of the shoulder, maybe they were walking a dog and the dog jumped for a squirrel and kind of just pulled a little bit, but not a violent trauma, not like someone fell down the stairs. And then afterwards, someone would treat it like a sprain for a little bit, and the shoulder, for some reason, goes into, it almost gets shocked. It gets shocked into having a lot of healing and a lot of scar tissue build up, and it gets very tight. And then when that scarring happens, it gets tight and painful and frozen. And that's what we
Painful
call frozen shoulder.
like radiating pain, painful like dull ache, painful like
Like a bad toothache, people would say, and but it's not too bad at rest. So if we're just sitting here, it's not too bad. But if you tried to do something like reach overhead, maybe the top of the cupboard, reach on top of the refrigerator, reach behind you or in the backseat of a car, or even turning the wheel of a car, or trying to put an arm in a coat sleeve, that's where people would really notice it. So it's probably okay in this area, but if you really tried to stretch it, then it really tells you to stop and slow down. That gets painful. It can also be painful to sleep on it at night. That's pretty something that we hear a lot.
Is it real? Is there a treatment for that?
Absolutely. And the good news about frozen shoulder, and really the good news for most of shoulder issues, is the vast majority of all these conditions are treated without surgery. So that's what we always like to do.
But you're a surgeon.
But I am a surgeon, right? So
Where
I'm here.
tissue is the issue.
That tissue is the issue. That's a good line. We'll have to put that on the cards here. But I'm here when other things don't help people, and we have to do a surgery. But surgery is really a last resort for most things. So most episodes of shoulder pain, whether it be a little arthritis or a tendonitis in the rotator cuff or a frozen shoulder, really the vast majority of things are treated without surgery.
Can you feel things within your shoulder that are actually going on in different parts?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So, and actually it's not atypical for pain in the shoulder per se to actually radiate down to the elbow. It doesn't typically go all the way down to the hand. So when a patient would tell me that I have pain really going all the way down my arm, that's when we actually think of a neck issue, maybe a pinch over the neck, something like that. And that's usually accompanied by maybe a little numbness or tingling or radiating burning type pain all the way down the arm.
How about pain right to the
That could actually be the shoulder. Good question. That could be the shoulder. But it's really my job to figure out what where it's coming from.
Yes.
That's not. That's
I do not have to look at WebMD.
You don't have to. Yeah, you
for
don't have to look at
shoulder.
WebMD. You don't have to go to medical school. It's my job to figure out.
Well, and I think, you know, we're giggling about that, but I think that's really an important point. You're here to help us prevent doing further damage, I would think.
Yeah, exactly. Anything that's not getting better with anti-inflammatories or a little rest or just some good stretching, basic stretching and strengthening principles for a little therapy. Anything that's persisting beyond that, that's probably a good idea to
Now,
give
you're
us
a
a call.
Clemson boy. We talked about it. And
Sure.
when we're talking about shoulders and being here in the low country, we are not a sedentary population.
That's right. That's why we're here.
Right?
Absolutely.
We are
Absolutely.
movers and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
What do you commonly see as far as sports injuries? And I want to say as we get older, but really it's for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Probably one of the more exciting aspects of medical care in general, and especially orthopedic care, is a concept we call the mature athlete. So someone that's just very active, you know, golfing a few times a week, playing tennis and being social and getting around. But it really lends itself to just a little bit of extra wear and tear on joints such as a knee, a hip, a shoulder. So we're really just taking an idea of preventing issues that are arising, whether it be pain when trying to golf or getting in a backswing or any overhand motion while playing tennis.
Okay.
Those are the things we'd watch out for.
And again, at what point do I need to come to you?
So good question. So any sort of major injury, you know, it's probably a good idea to have a real assessment, to get an x-ray, make sure nothing's cracked or broken. So any sort of major injury would be a good idea, but beyond that, anything that's bothering you and really persisting. So again, the basic principles would be thinking about just taking an over-the-counter anti-inflammatory like Advil or Aleve a couple times a day. Typically, that would calm things down.
Okay. Do you ice or heat?
Yeah, trying to ice. Yeah, trying to ice an area that's really inflamed would be a good idea. It's kind of counterintuitive to think that both of those things can work, but oftentimes ice can really cool down an inflammation, and heat can kind of loosen up the tissues, loosen up any fascia to get things stretched out. So that can, even though it's easy for me to say do both of those, it's
it's like
different things work for different patients, and it's important to treat every patient personally to find out what works for him or her.
Based on your experience, do you find that most of your patients are good consumers? Are they Are
Of
they
course.
informed?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really important that we really are able to direct people in the right avenues for learning about conditions. And that's a lot of what, what I do. So much of taking care of a patient is based on education and based on therapy and healing. And for instance, when I do a surgery, like if I repair a rotator cuff, the surgery part's, for me, pretty straightforward. You have a tendon that's torn and we sew something back together, but there's so much beyond that. There's so much about education and teaching and learning how to use a sling or therapy or things to do, things not to do. And that's why we have a good team here of different medical doctors, physical therapists, and other providers, nurses, and everything to help.
When you're talking about a rotator cuff, and you said rotator cuff and tendon in the same sentence, is that what a rotator cuff is?
Exactly right. So the rotator cuff, the anatomy, again, we're talking about a ball and socket here. So the anatomy, we call it a cuff because it surrounds all of that. And there are 4 major tendons that make up the rotator cuff. And basically, a tendon...
That's what I'm going to... What is a tendon?
What is a tendon? So a tendon is... with the way the anatomy works is there's a muscle, and then the muscle attaches to the bone somehow, and the way it does is through a tendon. So the muscle basically turns into a tendon, and it attaches to the bone. Probably a common example for a layperson would be to think about like the calf and the Achilles.
Okay.
So you have all the big calf musculature,
yeah.
and then that tapers down to a tendon, like the Achilles tendon, and then the tendon attaches to the heel. So it's the same thing in other parts of the body. Like the shoulder. So there are a lot of muscles over here in the shoulder blade and the shoulder girdle, and those taper down to tendons and then they attach to the bone.
Why is the tendon, the rotator cuff tendon so vulnerable?
It is, again, with the concept of it being so flexible. So it's all that motion, all that movement.
It in crazy ways.
You can imagine that sometimes there's a little hood in the shoulder blade. So if you have a little bone spur or something, that might make you prone to kind of wearing down that little tendon. But usually, even though it's wearing down, we could try things to calm it down without any surgery. But if it gets to the point where that's not working or it's really worn enough where there's a tear, then sometimes we would think about fixing it.
I know we got to take a break here in one second, but let's go ahead and do it now because I have like 16 questions.
Great.
Stay
Sounds
with
good.
us. We'll be right back with
course.
Dr. Scott.
Sure.
We're talking about shoulders, orthopedic surgery, and really other sports-related injuries.
Sure. Very good.
Pain. It can be different things for different people. A shoulder that takes you out of the game. A knee that stops you in your tracks. Ready to return to a better you? Hilton Head Hospital is here, right in the Lowcountry, to help heal what hurts. From diagnosis to treatment to full recovery, our fellowship-trained orthopedic specialists are committed to getting you back to your best. Hilton Head Hospital. Extraordinary care right here at home.
Hilton Head Regional Medical Center is located at 25 Hospital Center Boulevard. When traveling east on William Hilton Parkway, make a left-hand turn on Beach City Road, and the next left, Hospital Center Boulevard will be located just past the Hilton Head Library. Coastal Carolina Hospital is located on US 278 at Exit 8 on I-95. Telephone is 843-784-8000. On the web, www.coastalhospital.com.
The vision for Hilton Head Spine Center is very clear. It's to provide world-class spine care to our patients.
Physical therapists were there. They were there holding you up. It's nice.
I just love working with all of these patients and their families and getting to know them and helping them on their journey.
My life is definitely better, and I'm glad that I came here at Hilton Head Hospital.
We are back here today on Healthy Living with Dr. Douglas Scott, and we're talking about orthopedic care, health, prevention, some of the things that can and can't go wrong and what we can do about them.
Sure.
During the break, we were talking, I think we both have so many questions about really this part of the body, the shoulders and arms. One of the things I was going to ask is working out all the time and doing TRX and doing all these different things and playing tennis and playing this and playing that. Are there sports that make you more vulnerable to injury?
That's a good question. Not necessarily. You know, within reason. Any contact, really by definition, any contact injury, any contact sport may make you a little more vulnerable statistically to an injury. But other things that don't have a lot of high impact.
What does that mean, high impact?
High impact, something where there's just a lot of force repetitively. So like someone running track or cross country, there's just going to be a lot of force going through the ankle, the hip, and the knee. But
push-ups?
Not necessarily. Yeah, not necessarily. But still an important part of you know, an active lifestyle.
And probably what makes a lot of sense to you is making sure that the things you do with the correct form.
Right, exactly.
Do you see that a lot? Because I know you do a lot of sports injuries.
Right.
And you also work with the with athletes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I help the college here, the USCB athletes. So, yeah, exact form is very important, especially in the upper extremity. You know, thinking about posture is probably very important. So, just getting the shoulder blades back, and if you're doing any sort of repetitive movement, whether it be a sport or any sort of exercise or working out, important to have good posture and good form, just to make sure that the overall alignment of the shoulder blades and all of those ligaments and tendons are working together in harmony, because any sort of dysfunction can really cause, it kind of spirals into an issue.
A cascade effect or whatever.
It really does. It really turns into an area where certain tendons and certain body parts are getting overworked when they should be, and that leads to wear and tear. So that's a big part of my job, is to correct that.
You mentioned something interesting to me, because I know that a couple of my kids are tummy sleepers.
Sure.
And I'm seeing a lot of sleeping like this.
Right.
And I always wondered if that had an impact on shoulders or backs.
That's a good question. Not necessarily. It really whatever's comfortable. You know, a lot of people will come in though saying that, you know, I've changed my sleep habits, or maybe I had for some reason had your gallbladder taken out, or appendix, and then you started sleeping funny, and then it started bothering something else. That's something that we see commonly. But just to make sure that the overall alignment and posture is appropriate and getting people on the right track.
Can you talk to me about shoulder replacements? I hear a lot about them. Not sure what would cause them or what that would actually look like from beginning to end.
So great question. So different than other issues that we would see. So different than a frozen shoulder, different than a rotator cuff issue. Shoulder arthritis would be a common reason for which we would do a shoulder replacement. So in arthritis, unlike the other things we were talking about, again, we're talking about a ball and socket.
Yes.
But for arthritis, you kind of have this bone on bone concept, you know, that a layperson would see, where everything just gets worn down to the point where there are a lot of bone spurs and the ball and socket is not functioning appropriately.
Is that typically age related?
It could be. It would be rare to see it in a younger person, but we would for someone
like rheumatoid arthritis.
Rarely now we would see rheumatoid arthritis to the point where you would need a shoulder replacement. But that would be the reason. Typically, arthritis would be something that would give you kind of chronic pain, just kind of achy with any activity. Pain sleeping on it at night, and also limited range of motion is probably the biggest thing that bothers people. So especially kind of coming out to your side like this, that's really limited in someone with arthritis. So sometimes they can only get it this far as opposed to getting all the way out here. But again, like I was saying earlier, really the vast majority of folks are helped without surgery. So something like a cortisone shot right in the ball and socket tends to work really well for people.
You know, one of the questions, as I'm sitting here thinking about this, you know, we talk about primary care physicians a lot.
Sure.
But I'm wondering, and maybe this is, but I'm wondering if it wouldn't make sense to err on the side of caution and prevention and just occasionally come in and say, okay, you know.
Yeah, if something's bothering you, sure,
yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, just not a big deal, but just to kind of check out, like you said, is my posture okay?
Right.
Am I moving the way?
Absolutely. Anything that's really bothering, that's a good thought. Anything that's really bothering you in your persistent, that's a good time to see an orthopedist. You know, there are, you know, the right primary care physician, of course, could help us with other issues, but or just general concepts. But anything that has a specific problem that's really not going away with basic primary treatments, you know, probably a good idea to see a specialist.
Other than a funny bone in your elbow, what do elbows do? And you said, you know, they can be a cause of some problems too.
Absolutely. So probably the most common people watching the show are thinking about tennis elbow. So very common. So
I've heard about it. Yeah.
So tennis elbow is pain on the outside of the elbow typically. So and if you look at the anatomy involved, it's really the ligaments and the tendons connecting to the outside, and those are the ones responsible for raising the wrist up in the air. So you could imagine that a tennis player would do a lot of this type of motion, right? So any sort of backswing, you're going to be firing all those muscles. So just that repetitive motion just wears down and get a little tendonitis on the outside. But again, like we've said before, The vast majority of cases were helped with either a little brace or an anti-inflammatory or a cortisone shot or some physical therapy. Almost always we can find a combination of non-operative treatments to help people without surgery.
Are casts still commonly used? It seems to me as though I see many people with immobilizers or slings, and I've always wondered.
They're probably less. Yeah, they're probably used less frequently than in historically. And probably the reason is different sort of slings and braces have replaced conventional plaster or fiberglass casts, but still those options do have a role for especially a fracture. So especially fracture and surgery. Sometimes when we do surgery, we really need to stabilize the anatomy just to make sure everything heals appropriately.
And I want to make sure we get a chance to talk about sports orthopedics and sports injuries in athletes, because I know that's an area that you really enjoy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Seeing words of wisdom to parents, first of all, of some of these kids, and you go ahead.
No,
and you
great
have
question.
a young little boy.
I do.
So,
I have a little guy. So one day he's smaller now, but one day I'll be doing the same thing, worrying about falling
His
on
little
the
bones
football
are
field or
rubber
something.
right now. Right.
Right now they're growing so fast that if it cracked, it would heal just nicely. But probably the biggest thing is just knowing. Probably the biggest thing is actually knowing and being connected with the right team. So luckily in the area here, and I guess I shouldn't say luckily because it's purposeful, but we have a great connection with different athletic trainers and coaches, and again primary care doctors and PAs and other partners in our community to help any athlete that's either having pain chronically or having an injury or recovering through surgery. So. But just getting the right network, getting the right connections, and that's probably how we help people the most. Even though often it doesn't mean surgery, it's just being able to get connected with the right specialist to, if twisting an ankle on the soccer field, and just quickly being able to get a specialist to ensure that nothing's broken, because we really accelerate the concept of return to play. So whereas, a lay person or a citizen, maybe in our community in Sun City, that person would really tolerate giving it a little time to heal before getting back on the golf course. But you can imagine an athlete who's a varsity athlete at the college here, they have a timetable, right? They have a timetable to come back and help the team. So it's almost like a professional team that we take very seriously, of really ruling everything out, getting the right sort of bracing, taping if that's necessary to get him or her back on the field.
Are you basically the team leader for a sports injury? In other words, all I kept thinking about as you were talking was, you've got the injury. Is there therapy? Physical therapy? Do you sort of set up that whole interdisciplinary team?
Right. Yeah. And I guess I'm too polite or modest to say I lead all that.
Yeah, that's what I want.
But a specialist should
you
help about
have
that.
to have.
Yeah, it's an important piece of the puzzle. Right? But just knowing the right physical therapists, the right trainers, the right team, and coordinating all that to get the right follow-up and the right tests if necessary.
Because I would think, based on what you've told us just in this area, if you've got a tendon doing one thing or a ligament that you need or a muscle, they all require different modalities or interventions.
Yeah, exactly. So that's probably very important. So that's probably the biggest thing is getting connected with the right specialist. If you're, maybe a analogy for that might be if your shoulder hurts, again, we talk about different treatments for frozen shoulder or a rotator cuff or a tendon tear or a pinched nerve or arthritis, we would do different things and we would target different modalities for those different diagnoses. So probably important to see a specialist to get on the right track.
Oh, I mean, it's really fun to talk to you because I think you're very, again, I love my word user-friendly. I think you're very clear and concise, and you.
Well, that's what we should be.
Well, I feel clarity when I've asked you specific questions. Again, thank you a lot for taking time out of your busy day.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us during your busy day here on Healthy Living. Have a great day.